Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill, massive matchup in the SEC. Tennessee heading on the road to play Georgia. Dill, I'm going to start with this take. And this is a very similar take that we had 7 days ago when we were talking about the Ole Miss Georgia game. Like, you look at Tennessee along the lines of scrimmage, this has kind of been historically the differentiator between Tennessee and Georgia, between Tennessee and Alabama. I don't think that's the case heading into this matchup. One, I think we have massive question marks about this Georgia offensive line, not only in terms of running the football, but in pass protection as well. Then you look at Tennessee and say there ain't many better front sevens that we see in the country than Tennessee in the way they've played this year. Everybody wants to talk about Josh Heupel, Nico in the Tennessee offense, which is starting to find its stride. What more people need to be talking about is how dominant and physically imposing this Tennessee front seven is. Fired up to get into this one now. Before we do, and as always, I think most importantly, let it fly in the comment section. Dill, the spread, Tennessee 11.5-point underdogs on the road here. Tennessee fans, Georgia fans, let it fly in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, I want to start just there, and I want to start with this Georgia offense. 245 total yards against Ole Miss for Georgia on Saturday. Georgia's offensive line gave up 5 sacks, 9 tackles for loss. This is the problem that I'm seeing with this Georgia offense. Not only does Carson Beck just not look like himself, continue not look like himself over the last couple of weeks, this Georgia offensive line got whipped by Ole Miss up front. And the job is not going to get any easier with Tennessee coming to town. How do you see this Georgia offense, Tennessee defense matchup playing out Saturday?
And that is where it fundamentally starts. And I think Carson Beck even said it in his post-game press conference. When they don't run the ball, that offensive line is really not built to protect the passer at that level, especially at that left tackle spot. And they've struggled at times, and it really kind of rears its ugly head when they don't run the ball well, or when they can't run the ball well. And they couldn't run the ball at all against Ole Miss, which was, I think, a little disappointing, because you look like Ole Miss is a great pass rushing unit for sure. I think you maybe had some questions. Could you Kentucky them? Could you Kentucky that Ole Miss team? Georgia just couldn't get anything going on the offensive line. They couldn't move guys off the line of scrimmage, and they were giving up negative plays. And I look like Tennessee certainly had their moments in not defending the run incredibly well, having some poor run fits, had a couple against Mississippi State. And I'm not saying that like they're bad in any way. That's a great front seven, but they've had a couple moments where they've let teams rattle off some big runs. It's just the way Georgia's playing. Like, they haven't had big runs, and it feels like a couple of weeks now.
That's where I want to start. I want to start with this Tennessee rush defense. I mean, you kind of said, yeah, at times they've given up some explosive, but on aggregate, I mean, 2.9 yards per carry for opposing running backs. That's top 10 in the country. This is a very good front seven stopping the run. Why is this such a big talking point? One, that is, historically, when you think back to the dominant Georgia teams that have won national championships, they've been able to run the football at will against anybody in the country. They can't do that this year. But I think secondly, and most importantly, Carson Beck is so much better as a quarterback when he is working off play action. When you are behind the chains, like Georgia has consistently been on offense, you can't go to play action. Carson Beck has been struggling as a quarterback, just sitting back in the pocket and pushing the ball down the field. And to couple that, the offensive line has been struggling to keep him clean. If Tennessee can take Georgia's rushing attack away on Saturday, force Carson Beck to not kind of use play action, force Carson Beck to be a drop back quarterback and go through his reads without guys like Brock and Ladd. Like, we haven't seen this Georgia offense be very good. So if they can't run the football against Tennessee, it's going to be tough sledding for this Georgia offense to move it on Tennessee.
One thing I wanted to note from that Mississippi State game is I know Tennessee gave up some rushing yards, but you kind of look at the way Tennessee was playing. They were almost like, I almost don't think they were giving enough respect to their secondary. They were playing a lot of 5-man boxes, like a 5-man 5 front, and that's a tough matchup, like especially against the way Mississippi State likes to run the ball, where they're really slashing. They don't ask their offensive linemen necessarily maintain blocks for a particularly long time, but they get hats on hats. They open up a crease, and Mississippi State was able to hit them. I look at this Tennessee secondary. That, to me, is where, I mean, they get their love on the front seven, as they should. That's a dominant unit. That secondary is unbelievable. I think Gibson's emergence has been huge for them, because they got 2 boundary corners now that we haven't seen at Tennessee in God knows how long. I think that's a team that, again, I don't think they need to play that kind of light box, if you will, against this Georgia team, because I don't know where Georgia can hurt them
Yeah,
down the
two
field.
things I'll note. One, you forgot to mention my guy Boo Carter, absolute dog. The
Okay,
Tennessee
but
fans know I love him. More importantly, if you're Tennessee, you're heavy boxing him all night. Like who in Georgia's pass catching room is putting fear into you, pushing the ball down the field? Like I get Arian Smith is a very fast football player, but he's not exactly a wide receiver that if you can put hands on Arian Smith at the line of scrimmage, like Arian Smith is not that good of a wide receiver. It has struggled to be, a consistent pass catcher. I shouldn't say not a good wide receiver. Has struggled with his consistency, especially when he's dealing with contact at the line of scrimmage. That's kind of the problem with this Georgia offense. There's not really a pass catcher that is striking fear into an opposing defense. So if you're Tennessee, I think you're walking your safeties into the box. You're trying to stop the run, create some negative plays, put Georgia into third and longs, and Dill, like Georgia in third and long against Ole Miss, Carson Beck's average depth of target was 4.1 yards down the field against Ole Miss. Like it was very clear. Coach Bobo knew we can't hold up in pass protection. We have to go to the quick game. But if you're Tennessee, you're just squeezing down. And if they want to drop back and try to push the ball down the field and try to block Tennessee's front seven up, I think you say, hey, good luck with that. If you're Tennessee, you're trying to get after the quarterback there. This is a very good Tennessee defense versus a Georgia offense that is just struggling to find their identity and struggling to find their answers. Now, flipping the
no,
sides here,
I mean, you do have a guy in Etienne, and frankly, Frazier's kind of emerging a little bit too. You have running backs who can hit big plays. So that to me, I'm looking like that almost feels like the avenue Georgia's going to need to somehow rely on. And it's not, again, it's not been reliable avenue for Tennessee, but
no.
you have seen them give up a couple of them. The problem is, Tennessee makes a lot of negative plays in their own right. So that's been a problem for Georgia. I just look like you're going to need a huge game out of Etienne, I think, because he's to me the guy who is the explosive playmaker on this team at this point. You don't really have anyone else at this point because as much as Carson Beck takes heat, I'm looking these wide receivers, the tight ends, Jurasics, I think been so disappointing for them, almost like a net negative in a weird sense. So I'm surprised he's still playing as much as he does. But the offensive skill needs to help him out too. I think Etienne kind of is the guy to
But
me
I'm
who
going to
is.
disagree. Like Trevor Etienne clearly is not healthy. Number two, like you look at the running back numbers. I had this in my note sheet. I mean, Trevor Etienne forced 0 missed tackles against Ole Miss, had 1.3 yards after contact per carry. Nate Frazier, 2 yards after contact per carry. Like even the running backs, like I think they're leaving some plays on the football field as well. I think just the offensive playmaking in general around Carson Beck has not been very good. So you're struggling to run the football. You're struggling in pass protection. You don't have a ton of playmakers around Carson Beck who are scaring defenses, and Carson Beck himself is struggling. Like it's there's a lot of question marks with this Georgia offense, and they're going up against the Tennessee defense that it ain't getting much easier. Like this Tennessee defense has been very good to start 2024. They'll flipping the sides. The big question mark here is can Tennessee run the football in Georgia? It's obviously a very hard team to run the football against. As much as success as Ole Miss had, they weren't really able to run the football with their running backs. Look, Tennessee runs the football 62% of the time. That is top 10 in the country. Can Tennessee go on the road and run the football against Georgia? That is the biggest question mark in this football game here.
And I'm going to be honest, like I think Tennessee's they're going to be able to get theirs on the ground to an extent, but they're definitely not going to be able to play, I think, the way they exactly want to play in terms of how
Yeah,
they write with that
agreed.
offense. Just because, yeah, look, like Stackhouse, Brinson, they're playing so well. That inside linebacker core still, when they're playing in the box and they're playing kind of the game they want to play, they're playing some
How
dominant
about that
football.
true freshman, Chris Cole? Dude,
Unbelievable. So I
he's
look like I don't think you're going to get a ton from Tennessee. To me, this is a Nico game. This is like, and
yeah.
Nico's been building up to it. He's played really sharp. I thought he was sharp in the first half against Mississippi State. I thought he played his best game against Kentucky by far. He's going to need to be able to play that way, where when the throws are there, if he gets his shots to hit a big one, if he gets his shots to hit a 3rd and 7, he needs to make those throws. He's been making them, which I think is really encouraging for Tennessee. And like, I mean, Tennessee's getting dangerous to me now, but he's going to need to play that way because I just don't see them being able to march on Georgia on the ground
Yeah,
because they're
100%. I don't think there's a team in the country that can just run it down Georgia State. They're just too good in the front seven. Can they run the football successfully enough where you can take some pressure off Nico? But I think you crushed it. Like Nico's gonna have to play. You're going on the road and playing the Georgia Bulldogs. you're going to need good quarterback play if you want to win this football game. And like you said, it's one I think we should address. It sounds like Nico's going to be fine for this game. They kind of kept him out in the second half, precautionary reasons. Dill, I think one of the big storylines that not enough people are talking about, they want to jump down Nico's throat. Nico's been really good when he's been kept clean. His 70% completion percentage, 10 touchdowns, 2 interceptions when he's kept clean. When he's under pressure, that number drops to 41%, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Can Tennessee hold up in
I
pass
think,
protection?
frankly, that cuts both ways, though, because Nico's held the ball at times. I think that has
Agreed.
been a bit of an issue where the ball's just in his hands for too long. And I look at the way Jackson Dart played that Georgia team, ball was out quick. It was hot. It was, again, I don't know that Georgia's defensive line necessarily played good, but like they just didn't have a chance to get into that game as much because Lane Kiffin and Jackson Dart were able to keep the ball kind of out of their hands and getting it out quickly and kind of negating what I still think it can be a real problem for this Tennessee team. If they get the ball, if they're in too many obvious passing situations and they need to throw from the pocket, I don't know that Tennessee's offensive line holds up incredibly well. Like you've seen when Tennessee's gotten into those spots, like they did against Florida at times, like they did especially against Arkansas. You've seen some breakdowns in the pass protection. And as much as Georgia's defense didn't look good against Ole Miss, I know we all still know there is a unit in them to go play the Texas game where they just take over.
Yeah, that's the reason running the football is so important. Like, what's the number one reason you want to run the football well is to just kind of prevent a defensive line from just pinning ears back and getting after the quarterback. I'm not saying Tennessee needs to run the football for 250 yards against Georgia Saturday, but you do have to run the football consistently enough to take some pressure off that pass protection. And this is going to come down to Nico hitting those. Josh Heupel is going to dial some stuff up. Georgia has struggled at times defending that vertical passing attack. Defensive backs struggling to play the football in the air. You're going to have 2 or 3 opportunities to kind of change the game with some deep shots. Can you make those plays? Can you capitalize on those plays?
And can Nico get the ball out quickly? Because that is again, that's another thing you look at the past couple weeks. He's looked a lot better doing that. Yeah. And I look, Georgia, again, as much as they struggle with the deep ball, they struggled a lot dealing with the short intermediate game against Ole Miss. I mean, they were leaving guys wide open. I don't necessarily think Jackson Dart, they didn't make his life
yards after the catch. I think Georgia was trying to, hey, Jackson Dart wants to push the ball down the field. It's one of the most aggressive downfield passing attacks we see. We're going to take that away, which they did. But as a result, I mean, they were giving up so much. They were playing a lot of bail, and it was just underneath stuff, and it crushed Georgia. And one of the question marks is not can you only complete those throws underneath, but can you hit your wide receivers in stride? Can you be really good with your ball placement to allow your wide receivers to get loose after the catch, so to speak? Dill, let's get into the pick. I'll start. Tennessee, 11.5-point dogs. Give me the Vols. Look, you don't make a lot of money betting against Kirby Smart in this Georgia program, especially in the month of November. What from Georgia that you've seen the last couple of weeks is inspiring a ton of confidence in this team? Versus the flip side, I think we've seen the best 2 games Nico has played at quarterback. We know how good this Tennessee team is around him. And the big storyline is I don't think Georgia can dominate the lines of scrimmage. In years past, Georgia has dominated the lines of scrimmage against pretty much any team they've played. This is a Tennessee team that's one of the best teams in the country along both sides of the line of scrimmage. Give me the Vols to cover 11.5 points. This game is going to be awfully, awfully close in Athens.
Now, one thing I feel like we're all going to kind of forget going into this week is we're all saying the same thing about this Georgia team going into play Texas. Texas was rolling. Texas looked so good. And then Georgia kind of just gamed up, made it happen, played an unbelievable. And there still is that version of Georgia in this game. I don't even understand this 11.5 spread. I think when you told me to guess right before we got on.
Yeah, you said it was a pick 'em.
I was going to say 2.5 points for Tennessee. So I'm really, really surprised to see the 11.5. I'm not even going to pick that spread because I don't really think there's a world Georgia covers that. But I do think Georgia can win this football game. I'll still lean Tennessee to win this. I still lean Tennessee to win this football game, but I do think this.
This is convoluted. What's your official pick? Tennessee 11.5 points. What are you taking here?
Oh, well, they're going to cover 11.5. I'm almost saying I'm not going to regard that because I think it's stupid. I don't even understand how you will arrive at that for Vegas. But I do think people are going to think oh, Georgia's got no chance. They're dead. This team is a caged tiger. It's we've already seen them go out and just absolutely wax a good Texas team. So I don't think it's going to be as like lopsided as much negativity as Georgia's getting. I feel like it's still a really dangerous team.
I'll tell you this.
It's a
Vegas.
roundabout way of saying I think Tennessee is going to win this game, but I'm not overly confident.
That was the worst game prediction ever. All right, you got Tennessee to win. You're not overwhelmingly confident. Calling Vegas stupid. I'll say this: the Bills don't build themselves. Like, I think there's something to that line.
You get
what
it?
What a wild last 90 seconds of the episode. We'll close it down there. Both the boys are on the Tennessee Vols. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.